All right, today we're diving deep into one specific, pretty dense text, a 1977 sermon by Sun Myung Moon. We're going to unpack its core arguments piece by piece to really get a handle on the theological foundation it's laying out. So let's jump right in.
And it all kicks off with this one, really provocative claim. The sermon basically argues that our biggest fight, it's not with anything out there in the world. Nope, it's with the enemy right here inside our own skin. This one idea, it's pretty much the key to unlocking everything else in this text.
Okay, so first up, the text diagnoses the problem. To even begin to understand the human condition, it says, we have to start with this idea of a constant internal war.
And this conflict, it's laid out super clearly. On one side, you've got the mind, right? It's always reaching for something higher, for God, for perfection, for things with eternal value. But then you've got the body, and it's pulling in the complete opposite direction. It just wants the simple stuff, physical gratification, rest, food. According to the sermon, this fundamental split, well, that's the source of pretty much all our suffering.
But here's the thing. This internal struggle, this war, it isn't supposed to be our natural state. The text points directly to the fall of man as the specific event that completely shattered our original perfect harmony. So the crucial takeaway here is that this internal war is an abnormality, It's a problem that desperately needs a solution.
So if the problem is an internal war, it kind of makes sense that the solution has to be internal too, right? And that's exactly what the sermon lays out, a path of disciplined self-conquest.
And the text gets really specific about the body's three most powerful weapons in this fight. First, the desire for food. Second, the desire for sleep. And third, the desire for physical love. So things like fasting, staying awake, and celibacy, the sermon presents them not just as, pious acts, but as actual direct weapons in this spiritual war.
So you've got to be asking, why would anyone choose a path like that? Well, the sermon's logic is actually pretty straightforward. It says the body acts like a barrier that blocks us from God's love. So by sacrificing the body's desires, you're literally removing that barrier. It's framed as a simple transaction, almost like a good deal. Give up this lesser thing to gain something infinitely greater.
Okay, but this brings us to a pretty big logical challenge, doesn't it? I mean, the sermon is describing a path of such extreme discipline, conquering hunger, sleep, and love. That seems almost impossible for an ordinary person. So how can anyone actually win this war?
And the text gives a very clear answer. They can't. Not alone, anyway. This is where the absolute necessity of a central figure, a Messiah, comes into play, to make this seemingly impossible journey actually achievable for everybody else.
So, the Messiah's first job is to basically be the perfect example. He's the one who has already fought and won this brutal internal battle. In doing so, he creates a pattern, a kind of prototype that everyone else can follow.
But he's more than just an example. The sermon uses this really powerful metaphor of building a highway. The idea is that the Messiah forges a direct path from the absolute lowest point, what's described as the bottom of hell, all the way up to God, basically clearing the way for the rest of humanity.
And the text uses another pretty striking image to explain the third function, a fly on a horse's tail. It's a weird one, but the idea is that by attaching themselves to the Messiah, followers can complete a journey that would otherwise take them millions of years. They're essentially being carried along by his momentum.
Okay, so we have the path for the individual and the guide, the Messiah, but how does this get implemented on a global scale? Well, this is where the sermon argues for the necessity of a whole new kind of religious movement.
The sermon basically critiques what it calls conventional religions for being too limited, focused on specific nations or races. In sharp contrast, it calls for an ultimate religion that's totally universal, one that transcends all those barriers. Its mission is to serve all of humanity, and it acts as a tool for God's bigger purpose, not as an end in itself.
And in this sermon makes its purpose crystal clear. It explicitly states that the Unification Church is the fulfillment of this need. It's presented as the new revolutionary movement designed to transcend all those old barriers and unite the world under this one vision.
All right, let's pull all this together in our final section. We've looked at the problem, the solution for the individual, and the global vehicle for that solution. So now, what does this journey actually look like for a follower on the ground?
Well, the sermon lays out this very clear four-step progression. Step 1. It all starts with the individual conquering their own internal mind-body conflict. Step 2. They follow the Messiah's pattern to build a God-centered family. And from there, the mission expands.
You take that family model and expand it to the tribe, then the nation, and eventually the entire world.
And here, the sermon introduces this concept of shared responsibility. The idea is that the Messiah does 95% of the heavy lifting by building that highway to God. The followers' part? That's the remaining 5%. And that 5% is their commitment to actually walk that path, which the text calls the road of persecution.
And this is the prize at the end of the road. The sermon comes back to this point again and again. The entire difficult journey, all the self-denial, the persecution, the discipline, it's all pointed toward achieving this one ultimate goal, a direct experience of God's love, which is described as being powerful enough to encompass everything, past, present, and future.
So, to wrap this all up, we're really left with this central question that the sermon itself poses. It presents this incredible reward, the ultimate love of God, but it also outlines a very clear and very demanding price, the total conquest of the self. And that tension right there is really the core of this entire message.